Of course, we are recording the process, and if anyone has an objection, please note it in writing, or you can leave the meeting. We are going to record it because we do want to make it available at a later stage, and we are going to use it for training purposes. I think the question, especially this morning, there's various ways to look at it. So let me start sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, I just want to make sure I still see the chat. Yes, okay, that I can see everyone that's coming in. Guys, this is one of the, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Elise Leroux, and I'm the Managing Director of Expello. I'm also I was practicing as an eviction attorney for many years before I started participating in Expello full time. And this morning's topic, I think, has got a big influence from different aspects. I think the one part that is quite important is, from a legal side, the way that we always taught people, the process to follow. The second one is what I see in business and practice. Being able to work with so many rental agents the past times and really being actively involved, I sort of seeing what works and what doesn't work. Also, Expello works with a lot of defaults, and we work with a lot of the tenants. And from there, all of these different avenues brought me to this morning's session. So what we're going to look at this morning is, when do we just focus on the collection, and when do you give notice to vacate? And what it currently feels to me is that some people, especially the attorneys, goes very strong on send a demand and cancel and proceed legally. And then if you go to the owners, they are so stuck on just getting their money. And I think there is really seriously needed a balance between the two of them. Morning, Claire. It's great to see you. I got Lauren's message as well. Looking out for her. Petra, good morning. It's also great to have you here, Philippa. I see a lot of regular faces, and that is amazing. David, welcome. Always an honor to have you here as well. A big name in the industry. Now, let's start right into it. Let's see, how do I? Okay, there's various factors to consider if you decide on your way forward. And the reason for this is because various people deal with it differently. The first one is it the rental property? The rental property is believe it or not, plays a big role in your decision which way you're going to go to. The second one is the tenant, which you're going to say, Elise, that is quite obvious. And to an extent it is. It does play a factor which way you're going to go to. But then also the more important part is the landlord. And the landlord almost is one of the biggest factors that having an impact on the way you're going to move forward. And I'm going to explain these three factors in detail. Now, if one looks at the rental property, there is various things that one has to consider. It is the market that plays a role, and is it easy to find a new tenant? And what I mean by that is purely on the strategy. Please also remember, the question is not just if you're going to cancel, because really, if they don't pay for a long, you need to cancel. I think it all comes down to what is your strategy and when we're going to cancel. So the first step is going to be, is it going to be easy to find a new tenant? Now, usually where this really played a big role is when people have commercial units, people can't always afford big rentals. So it's sometimes difficult to get a new tenant, so they don't really jump to do eviction. In the rental market, usually it's very easy to find new tenants. And that is where it's important you as the agent or the expert of your property to know what is your market saying at this stage. If you're going to have, you're going to look for a new tenant, is it going to come easily? Do you have to prepare yourself for 2 or 3 months without a tenant? What is the situation? The second thing is, will the landlord receive the same or more rental? This is where you have had a tenant in the property for many years, and the escalations took place. And as you know, sometimes in the market, that growth isn't equal to where you're going to go in now. So, for example, if you can rent a property now, it's going to cost you about 8,000 Rand. But this person has been renting your unit for the past 4 years, and they started at 7.5, and now currently they're paying 9. So now the question is, do you cancel or do you just put a bit of pressure on the tenant? The landlord also, it's very important to manage, because this is one of the factors the landlord has to take into consideration. It has an impact on your strategy forward. Again, that you see as to how you are going to approach this default. The third one, which I think is number 3 and 4 is very linked, is the property at risk if it stands empty? Now, sometimes in complexes where there is hijackings or, in a complex, you need to have security. And you're definitely never going to go and cancel and evict if you don't have everything in place, being a security guard, being a, somebody there. And I would really suggest professionals, because I've heard people saying, no, we've got it. They send their brothers with a baseball bat and everything, and then the tenants really come unharmed, or professional hijackers who can be really dangerous, and they take over the whole situation. So always make sure that before you cancel, to make sure, is there a risk and has it been mitigated? Now, the last one, also linking up with the monthly rental. Now, just to say, the rent never determines whether it is feasible for an eviction. Whether your rent is 3,000 Rand or 20,000 Rand, it's not the rent that you're just losing, you're losing your property. The reason why I say the monthly rent is because the monthly rent sometimes determines the type of tenant that you are focusing or you will get. What I mean with this is, I've seen tenants with that's in your lower income, and your thousands, 2,000s, or even 3,000s. That monthly rent is very low, and many of them are either getting money on cash, or they're getting paid on the last day, or they're not as fast and strict as usual. But the agents there has to really be hands-on. And every month they most probably will do the demand and do the threatening and everything, and every month they will pay. So as much as it is a given that they're going to pay late, it is that they are going to pay. So depending on the rental, it determines the rent and the tenant, the circumstances, also the approach of management. Be careful not to, so it's not because it's 3,000 Rand and you don't want to do an eviction of 40,000 Rand because you're just losing 3,000. Nothing to do about that. It is just purely because of the management of this type of tenant, you know that you are going to focus on it and they are going to pay. Even though they're paying late, considering to other tenants that's out there, this tenant is actually not too bad, if I may say it in that circumstances. That is with regards to the consideration of a rental property. You guys are welcome to drop any questions or comments in the chat, as I will, after each slide and each factor, I will address it and answer it. I think many of the things I almost want to say here is things that you guys already know. And I think sometimes, although you know this, it's sometimes good to just hear that reinforcement as to why it plays a role and why you consider this type of things. It also will help you, hopefully, when you speak to your landlords, to help you manage their expectations. Now, the most important one, I think, and the one that plays the biggest role is the tenant. The tenant definitely is going to determine your way forward. Now, first thing is, how long has the tenant been in the property? Now, guys, I don't know about you. If they just moved in, it's been 2 months and they suddenly default. Warning bells. Because, I mean, you just passed the vetting. They just now confirmed that they can afford it. And now suddenly they're defaulting. That would definitely be of concern. That matter you'll approach differently to somebody, for example, that's been in the unit, for example, for a year or 2 years or for 10 months, and suddenly they default. Their behavior already, you have a relationship with them, you know that they have been paying on time all the time, and suddenly they don't pay. It means there's something to happen. So your approach is going to be to find out. So this is one of the factors to consider. The second one is it the first time the tenant defaults? Now, everyone has that one incident that happens. Everybody has an unexpected expense, and maybe they can't pay their rent in full. I always feel that, if something bad happens, your rent is your biggest expense, I agree. But at least if you can pay something towards it, it still shows a sign of good faith and to contact them. So if it's the first time, you and most agents also, because you have a relationship with the tenant, you do take a different approach to somebody that keeps on defaulting. The third one, I just want to make double sure. I have this awesome, sounds like Harley motorbike driving up and down the street. Hopefully nobody else hears this, guys. Awesome motorbike. If you do, please just let me know if the noise is too much. The factor that plays the most important role to Expello is, what is the reason for the default? I think almost that is one of the first things that one has to ascertain is to why. So many times when people phone a tenant and say, hi, I see you have not paid your rent, their response immediately is, no, but I am going to make payment. I'll pay the end of the month. And people leave the conversation there because they are so happy that they got a comment that they're going to pay the end of the month, or, in 2 days or whatever. They haven't asked the question as to why they have defaulted. Now, what we've seen why this is important is because this absolutely determines our way forward. If somebody lost their employment, for example, and let's face it, I hear there's a new interest rate hike coming up. Maybe they just purely cannot afford it anymore, or they lost their employment, or their partner lost their employment. The possibility for them to keep on paying the monthly rent is very low. So if we know they lost their employment and we just focus on getting this month's rent, because remember that the landlord is on your back, and you've got processes and you've got so much pressures going on, you just want to get the money so that you can pay it out. The only thing that you are doing is you are extending or prolonging the process. Next month, most probably they again not going to pay, because they will have to go borrow money in order to make payments. So find out what is the reason. If it was, I had a car accident and I had to pay the panel beater, or we had a funeral and I was expected to contribute, and unfortunately, I didn't budget for that, and that's why I short paid or didn't pay, but I can pay up. That is something that they can recover from. They will be getting their income again, and then they will be paying the rent as normal. So that is one of the biggest things, is to ascertain from the reason for the default, will they be able to pay the rent next month and the month after that as well? Be careful if they say, no, I lost my job, but I'm getting a big payout. Woohoo! Guys, and I have to stop saying guys because that's not really correct. But everyone, be careful, because get proof of that. The landlord maybe cannot be without an income for 3 to 4 months until they sort out their money that's coming. It's like a carrot hanging in front of someone. you need to get that information and get proof. But sometimes those files can take a very long time, and there's maybe no guarantee. Also, you have to be careful. Maybe they're promising that money to everyone. So by the time it's paid out, none of it is going to come to the landlord for its rent. So again, factors to take into consideration. Now, it feels to me these days, over and above just the zeros and the ones, the things that one has to see is the integrity of the tenant. And what I mean by that is, if you've made an arrangement with the tenant, say, okay, I heard what you said, okay, from next month you'll be paying your rent again, and you'll be adding 1,000 rand, something to that effect, and they keep to that arrangement, that is gold to me, because it means that it shows they are responsible and they will act ethically. If you make an arrangement and they don't keep to it, and maybe you go and make a second arrangement, and again, they don't keep to it, then that is the person, if they say good morning, you look outside to see where the sun is sitting. Purely to make sure to know that although you have to do everything on paper, that you know that you can't 100% trust it. Now, saying that, remember, even with the first arrangement, it's also always a gamble. But it doesn't mean you're not going to enter into an arrangement, because an arrangement sometimes can save the owner more time than just proceeding with an eviction. Making the arrangement can save them money. And what I mean by that is if they would expel, yes, it's fine, they pay the eviction cost. But what I'm talking about is eviction takes time. If you make an arrangement, they are going to be out much faster. So then you can put a paying tenant in, and I think that is very valuable. If you made the arrangement once and they didn't keep to it, that's why I'm so strict to it, because you are giving them the good faith saying you are entering into this agreement. And if they don't keep to it, to walk away. The other thing is, does the tenant communicate? Now, I don't know about you guys, but most tenants, sometimes it feels to me they go into as what mode? Ostrich mode. That's the way. And they just purely pretend that it doesn't exist. And it's even worse if you send a letter of demand and all the notices, and you sort of say to them, hi, I see you haven't paid the rent, and they still pretend that nothing is happening. If you need to go and knock on doors or anything to prompt a response, then, it frustrates the whole process. It's almost like, I remember this one police officer said, somebody might be not guilty, but the moment that if he looks at them and they start running, and he needs to run after them and catch them, he already is upset. Whether this person is innocent or not, he made him run, he made him work extra harder just to be able to speak to him, and you're upset. Same thing with the tenant. So be cautious about it. And when you finally speak to the tenant, you must make it very clear and say that, listen, this relationship in this agreement is reliant on you being open for communication. And if you do not respond to any of the letters or anything, it's going to start being deemed that you do not want to stay here anymore and you want to vacate. So you always have to train them to speak to you and to communicate. Again, just because they are going to ask you the whole time for extensions or things, it doesn't mean that you have to grant it. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm purely saying is part of this whole process is to judge a person's character. If they've been staying there and they suddenly don't pay, and even before they make the payment, they make the contact, they want to make an arrangement. I think that person, although the landlord was going to say, no, but they have to pay. Sometimes maybe they did have a funeral and they don't have the money to make payment. How are we going to fix it? Maybe they are going to pay next month. And it seems everything is on par. Landlord, do you want us to cancel now this tenant who's been paying well, can't pay 1 month, but is making an arrangement, and you will be able to continue paying? Do you really want us to cancel? Or do you want us to make this arrangement? Just keep in mind, if we cancel and you need to get a new tenant, the other factors, do we know what we are getting? Secondly, will you be able to get a tenant that fast? And there's various factors to take into consideration. Before I go over to the landlord, is there any comments from anyone in the group this morning with regards to the tenant? Nothing in the chat. Okay, so I hope everybody is still on par. And thank you. I'm seeing the hands and everybody's still happy. Good news. Now, the second one is very difficult, and I think it's almost the most important part that I have seen, and that is the landlord. Landlords tend to be very emotional, and one will think that, okay, but this landlord, it's a financial thing. Why will they be emotional? And I used to say, listen, I had a property, well, I still have a property which I leased out, but at that stage, and my tenant defaulted. And being an eviction attorney, acting for many land, owners, suddenly I also started feeling emotional. And you want to do crazy stuff. And I think it's not just because of the non-payment. Yes, the financial pressure is there, but what is important is the fact that you have to know that it goes about they feeling the injustice. How can a person not keep to their end of the bargain? And I think that is what happens, especially if it's tenants that's not cooperating. If a landlord goes and they give them time, or they enter into the agreement and they are accommodating, and then what happens is they don't keep to their end of the bargain. Before I go on with this, Miriam asked, can we ask for the SAPS number if the tenant says the bank account was hacked and they did not pay their rent? Yes, you can. And if you want to, Miriam, say that, listen, I hear what you are saying to me. I, however, have to hand proof to the owner to confirm what you are saying to me. So please, can you just show me, give me the SAPS number, or if it was a bank account, give me your reference number from the bank, saying you reported it to the FNB bank. This is the case number that has been allocated. Proof that the fraud was committed. For example, I don't want to say, I was one of those unlucky people that's been cloned this month, and it seemed like I had one crazy evening with a lot of Uber bills going off my account. Now, on the one hand, it's easier just report it to the bank because you definitely want to stop the fraud. But I know going to the police is not going to help me. And it was sufficient for the bank to get my money back. Then that bank reference, that report to the fraud department, and if possible for you to be able to confirm it, that should be sufficient. I hope that helps, Miriam. Okay, coming back to the landlord. So one will have to firstly decide what will benefit the landlord the most. And now this is going to sound strange because it's to get the non-paying tenant out and a paying tenant in. Yes. But again, it comes down to the strategy. If this landlord is really dependent on the monthly income, it's going to be better to make an arrangement. For example, from Expello's side, we would rather offer the tenant money to vacate or pay their deposit to move out in order to get the tenant out instead of proceeding with the eviction. Not because we want to save money for not paying attorneys. It is because the one thing that we cannot guarantee is time. So landlords are sometimes so eager to quickly go, but we will sue them. And I see sometimes agents get so involved in, yeah, but it's an ethical thing. And I want to prove that. And, this tenant now sort of insulted myself as well. I want to take him to court. He must feel it. That is not going to be in the benefit of the landlord. If we allow our ego to become part of this, it's all about called down, when can we get a defaulting tenant who will not be able to pay the rent in the future, who will continue to default, or maybe the default will become bigger, to get that person out. For one of the examples, I want to use two examples with landlords. The first example was a very old lady, which was very nice. And she had these tenants in her unit for about 4 years. So they looked well after the house. However, what happened was the husband he is the breadwinner, and he lost his employment. So he no longer had income. Now, of course, the first month the letter of demand goes out, and the landlord firstly is very upset, because how can you now, these good people, they send out a letter of demand. Luckily, the agent came back and said, but I have to, because it's an expeller matter, and I have, the moment they breach, I have to send out the letter of demand. It's to start the process. Okay, we're not cancelling at this stage, but we have to have the discussion. So this, considering what the landlord said, listen, I know these tenants, they're good people, everything. I do not want us to immediately evict. I'm happy to enter into an agreement. This tenant indicated they are getting money, and this will be able to pay upfront 6 months, whereafter they will then see whether the husband got new employment or whether they're going to vacate. Considering the history, Expeller felt comfortable entering into that agreement because the landlord's going to save, and because she's going to get her payment at the end of the month, which was indicated by the landlord, by the tenant, and they gave documents. To our surprise, suddenly at the end of the month, the tenant advised, no, there's a delay. But it's going to be 2 weeks. I indicated I am getting concerned, because now there's purely a postponement, and now suddenly we're just getting, but payment is going to be made. It doesn't say when. The tenant also suddenly no longer give us documents that we can actually go and confirm that the payment was extended. So needless to say, 2 weeks, because it was more or less the 2-week delay in that time period was actually not going to influence the eviction too much. We said to the owner, okay, one last chance to the tenant. 2 weeks came past, the tenant did not make payment. So the landlord said, no, but the tenant now explained, Shami, he's got 4 children, so let's give him another month. That's when we had to have the conversation with the landlord and say, landlord, Expeller is not willing to give the tenant a further postponement. We want to cancel and proceed with an eviction if the tenant doesn't vacate. The reason why we are strict at that stage is because if you allow too many indulgences, people are getting used to that they will get indulgent. So, for example, if you know it's okay to arrive at work 10 minutes late, you're supposed to work at 8, but you arrive at 10 past and nobody says anything. At a stage, you're going to be okay if you arrive at 10 past 8. It's no longer going to bug you, because you know nobody's going to say anything. Same thing with the tenants. They feel that, okay, no, but this landlord is giving me time. The landlord is giving me extension. So if there's a place to wiggle, it is with the landlord. So we have to make it strict. We said to the landlord that, landlord, so you have a choice. Either you give the tenant a further postponement or indulgence to make the payment, but Expeller will cancel their services. And if they, and either I want to say, when they don't pay, you will have to pay for the eviction, or allow us to proceed with the process. That made the landlord think differently about the whole process, because suddenly she realized that she had to take the emotion out of the process and work with it on her own. So in this instance, the landlord was the nice one in giving an extension. I've also seen too many times landlords being nice, and then after 3 months of being nice or telling the agents, don't send a letter of demand, don't do anything, now let's give them a chance. Then suddenly they start saying, yo, the agent is the worst, they're delaying, nobody wants to do their work, they want the eviction today. Eviction can't happen today. An eviction process is a 3 months process. So one will have to make sure the landlord understands the scope of what is happening now and the impact of their decision. Now, the second one for which I feel terrible for is, in many instances, you have done everything. You've done the demand, you have done the agreement and everything. And now the only step that is left is for you to cancel and the owner to proceed with the eviction. The problem is many owner doesn't have the money to evict. So if it's with Expeller, it's fine. All of that is sorted. They don't even have to worry about the choice. But if you have an owner, and I spoke to an agent in the week, where he says to me, Elise, but I don't know what to do anymore because the owner doesn't have the money to pay for the eviction and the tenant is purely not paying. Now, firstly, you most probably already for 3 months have been sending invoices, have been demanding the payments and are getting no payments. That also means that you are getting no income. It should come to a stage to say to the landlord, I can no longer manage this property. Because how can you manage a property if there's no income and you're not getting paid for this? The landlord will have to go take out a loan or do something to evict this person. Because if you've been begging and doing everything that is there, you won't be able to just miraculously get money. It also sometimes what happens is it puts a lot of pressure on the agents that they actually proceed to try and do illegal stuff. Please never ever resort to cutting electricity, taking off doors, any of those type of things, purely because the owner is putting pressure on you. That's why, and I'm just going to say it here, even if it is just to cover yourself, always offer Expeller to your owner in the beginning or when the tenant is in a breach. But it's not your fault if the landlord cannot afford an eviction. It's also not your fault if the tenant didn't make payment. I'm going to repeat that. It is not your fault the tenant didn't make payment. The only time that you can be held liable if you were really reckless when you placed the tenant. And I have to say, with most agents and people that we work with, we know the due diligence they have on that. They keep when they do the vetting process. Some things you just can't foresee. So with regards to landlords, firstly, what is in the best benefit of the landlord? Is it to evict immediately? Is it to give another time? And then to consider if they don't have the money to evict, also at a stage you say that you no longer can manage it until they actually proceed with the eviction. Any questions at this stage? I hope what I'm saying here makes a lot of sense. And I know nobody likes to say to an owner, listen, I no longer want to work for you, but technically you can't offer your services if there's not much to manage. So this brings us to the next thing. When to cancel or to vacate. So we have now looked at various factors. And of course, you've sent the letter of demand. I have to just stop here and interrupt myself. Remember, when we're doing all of this process, I've at no stage indicated that you should not follow due process. Send out the letter of demand, okay? Because you want to start the process, the normal standard TPN letter of demand is fine, especially with people that reach for the first time. You maybe do not want to go in too harsh, because the purpose of this letter of demand is going to be purely to start the process, that if something in the future is going to happen, if the owner wants to evict or something, that you also have a deadline. Remember, a letter of demand is a time limit, so it creates urgency. That's why you send it. If it's a repeat offender, yes, maybe then you want to use these more harsh letter of demands from attorneys that systems generate. But also you have to consider this. So you send your letter of demand, and of course you can only cancel on day 21. I want to differentiate here between the cancellation date and the date to vacate. So you are only going to cancel. I repeat, you're only going to cancel your lease agreement if you know the landlord is able to proceed with an eviction. The reason for this is if you cancel now and this tenant is illegal for more than 6 months, you have actually put an additional burden on the landlord if they decide to proceed with an eviction. The second thing is, remember, if you cancel a lease agreement, you are no longer entitled to claim rent. Rent is no longer due. You can only claim rent in terms of a lease agreement. Yes, I know everybody's now starting, they want to put it in damages held over, but technically you are managing a lease agreement. If there's no lease agreement, technically you have nothing to manage. So go have a look at your mandate. If the moment you've cancelled, technically your mandate has also stopped. The reason why the held over, damages held over, is for the landlords or the assistants, once they take legal action, that they can quantify the damages. That is why that is there. Up to now, in this past 5 years, I've never used a statement where we needed it to show damages held over. The reason being, if we proceed with an eviction, even if the landlord would want to issue summons, they automatically go and say, I suffered damages of this amount per day. And how you calculate that amount is you're going to take the monthly rent times 12, divide by 365, and you're going to say, I'm suffering loss of income of this amount per day from date of cancellation until the date that they vacate. And that's how you calculate it. So the purpose of the statements that you send out every month, it might have a contribution. However, the risk might be bigger that you did not correct it or a system fixes it and maybe it calls for rent, because the moment after cancellation you ask for rent, it doesn't reinstate the lease agreement, it puts a lease agreement in place because you demand rent, and if they pay, it's a problem. So first things first, if you decide to cancel, don't ask for money held over, because technically, especially Xpella clients, everything is in our hands. We'll sort it out. If you cancel it, then, and it's not an Xpella client, the owner must go to an attorney. The attorney will then deal and tell you what they need. Please don't just continue sending out stuff. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I know you can cancel after 21 days, and depending what your letter of demand says, some of them say we will cancel immediately, or it will tell you what time. What I have seen is to use a bit of logic. Say, for example, you can cancel and we can evict. I always say, yes, great, let's cancel, for example, on the Friday, but let's give them chance until the Monday to vacate. Now, the difference with this approach to what I've always said when I was still in practice, because in practice, we say cancel and you must immediately vacate. We cancel and you are required to immediately vacate. The reason the difference is many of the letter of demands doesn't really focus on the cancellation and that we are going to require them to immediately vacate, especially if you don't know whether the owner will be able to proceed with an eviction if it's not an Xpella client. So your letter of demand, you start the process and you want to keep your options open. It's a general letter of demand enough to start the process. If you now cancel and you know that, okay, maybe this person is going to have a scrap And you're now going to give them on until Monday to vacate, because they most probably will be able to vacate from that time. It's got to make more sense, because you and me know they won't be able to vacate today if we send them the letter today. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is also, if you send a letter and you say that we are going to cancel and we are going to require you to vacate, and suddenly they make payment, that doesn't cancel the cancellation. But what you can do is you can say, well, or if you speak to the tenant, you now received your letter, it's cancelled and you are required to vacate Monday. But if you make a payment towards your arrears, maybe I can convince the landlord to give you until the end of the month to vacate. You hear my wording. I'm not reinstating the lease. I'm purely extending the time for them to vacate. Why does this make sense? Because firstly, you have that element of pressure now to say that if you don't vacate, if you don't want us to come, or if you don't want the eviction process to start on Monday, and you actually make some sort of payment, so you're getting some money from the tenant, you can then vacate the end of the month. I also want to use this caveat, and I always want to say, many times people are so pressured to get money out of the tenant now. Guys, they must probably need that money to pay for a deposit somewhere else. So to put pressure on them to get the money today, I know the landlord wants the money, and I know ideally we do not want to use the deposit because the deposit is there for damages. So I'm not saying going and just pay out the deposit, but if we put pressure on the tenant today, and you can say, yeah, but we can pay out the deposit. The problem is, what I see in the market is they're not going to have the money to move. So I would rather say, okay, you don't have to pay us this month if they're only 1 month outstanding, for example, and you vacate, then just going on and putting pressure on getting the money. In summary, just on this, so what I'm saying is, firstly, cancel only if you know the landlord can evict. If you're an Expeller client, good news. You do not have to worry about this. We take this burden off your hands. We will tell you everything. Second thing, be realistic with your time periods. If you want to cancel, I'm not saying give them an additional month. That's not what I'm saying at all. Again, if you're an Expeller client, we will handle this for you. If you are managing your property and it's not an Expeller client, it is important that the tenant knows that you are going to cancel and they'll be required to move, that they can start looking now already. Then the third thing is use the time to vacate to make it a reasonable thing. Philippa is asking sorry, Philippa, now I just threw you under the bus. But I've got a very good question is, what happens if they short pay every month? And I love that question because that is actually one of the warning signs. Again, training your tenant. If they see it's okay to pay short and there's no real consequences, I think the conversation should immediately be, okay, I see you short paid. Why have you short paid? Listen, we are allocating the payment received firstly to your utilities and all of that, and the balance to the rent. Okay, so you are short paid on your rent. Your utilities and everything is already is going to be paid. If it is because they have an affordability problem, then it's important to rather assist them to find a more affordable place. They must also know that if they short paid, if they didn't pay the full demand amount, you can cancel. Whether it's just 100 Rand or not, you can cancel. And that is super important. I hope that answers your question. Now, I've given a lot of information. And luckily, I know everybody had hopefully a bit of a long weekend. So this is just the important notes that I want you guys to keep in mind. If the tenant does not have money, don't focus on collecting the money. If there is no money, doesn't matter how you threaten them, doesn't happen how many times you stalk them, you message them, they don't have the money. Then it doesn't help focusing on the money. That's the first thing. Always tell your landlord, they've got 3 years to claim it. That's when it's more important to focus to get this person out. How are you going to structure it for this person to move out? They can go and claim it from them within 3 years. Usually they'll wait 3 months if you don't know where they are, and they will pop up again and a tracer will find them. Then you can go and issue summons against them if you want. Timing of your cancellation is super important. Don't cancel if you are not ready to evict. That is super, super important. I love Kerry's notes. We currently have a tenant who has not paid March rent. He explained he will pay March and April on the 28th of March. The landlord is blaming us for non-payment of rent. I suppose on the 29th, the landlord can start the eviction. The lease is not with Expeller. I've given the Expeller the details for the next lease. Thank you, Kerry. Now, for this example, yes, the landlord, if they don't make payment on the 28th, then yes, they can start the eviction process. It is important to note that then at least the landlord has an opportunity and actually very good negotiation skills there, because now you haven't just secured the current outstanding, but you entered into the agreement there. And I would usually add to the tenant and say, okay, we can agree you will pay March and April's rent then on the 29th of March. But I also want to know, if you can't pay this, that you will agree to vacate. So you make the note that they must have in the back of their minds that if you can't pay, you must move. Some people are so worried that they will be held liable for the cancellation penalty, or the landlords are so pushing on the cancellation penalty. Guys, it's going to be better to just for them to move. I think the problem for tenants just vacating is sometimes better than trying to get them to move. So I'm holding funds for you, Kerry. I hope they pay. Then I want to put a bit of a spanner in the works. Now, I know a lot of people are sending SMS reminders to their tenants to make payments, and I think they work perfectly. But one thing sort of made me realize that sometimes if you're going to say to a tenant, make payment or it will affect your credit report, that doesn't really hurt, or it doesn't really hit home. What if it impacts my credit report? Except if they see the clear score advert on TV, they might not realize the impact it will have. If you can, maybe change it to say, non-payment will affect all future rental applications. This is that they know that it's going to have an impact on the next time they want to rent. Because most probably if they're renting now, if they move, they're going to rent again. So not just to say the credit report, you can add it or say non-payment will affect your credit score as well as all future rental applications. Please go test that. I want to see what is the impact of that, and if that is not going to help people to actually make better payments, because they're going to realize what they are doing, that these short payments, these things, because I don't think tenants always understand. Yes, tenant profile network, for example, TPN, it says that it's a credit bureau, but what does it mean? How does it impact me in a way that I understand? Oh, so everyone must probably, if I'm going to apply again, whether, oh, for example, I'm renting now with Rawsons, I'm going to be clever. I'm not going to go to Harcourts, for example. They won't know. No, dude, they're going to know. Everybody is going to know. So that is something that I want us to try, and please, I would like some feedback if that actually has an impact. And then the last note, I almost, if you can see my mouse, it's in capital letters. And this is for the landlord and the agent. Do not make choices based on emotions. If you need to type that email, use the exclamation marks, use the everything, but do not send it. Sometimes you can actually send instead of a very long email, in a 3-pointer. You move out either Monday or Tuesday at this time. You don't have to go in detail. Don't get strangled up in the nitty-gritties. No, I was not rude. That type of things. Keep the emotions out. That is one of the very, very vital things. I think it's been a very long time that I spoke so much nonstop. And I want to say thank you to each and every one for attending this session. And the amount of experience actually that we have here this morning, I'm sure that many of you said, yes, Elise, that's what we are doing. Yes, Elise, that's what we are seeing. That is just a confirmation. And I think sometimes these sessions I also want to use to hear your input. If you come back and say, Elise, that reminders are actually making things worse, then at least we know. And we can help the industry, because at the end of the day, we have to start teaching our tenants again to behave and act correctly. Now, just to say quickly, on this screen is a QR code. If you guys quickly want to snap it or anything, the nice thing about it, it's got our video and it says, yes, I'm interested and I want to find out more. It's a nice link and a nice video that you guys can share. And I hope that that's going to really give value. Then I just want to see quickly, okay, I'll have to stop sharing. Before I do, just a little couple of other things. I'm just going to launch a small poll. I would love your feedback. Now, I am not a natural presenter. This is not my day job, and I'm still getting used to it. And I would love your feedback. Please, if you guys can send us suggestions. On the 19th of April, I am going to do a session as to when to hand over to Expello and the bridge process. The reason for this is we still see a lot of clients not using Expello as efficient as they can. Or maybe you feel guilty. Okay, this is the first time that they defaulted, so we thought we can handle it. No, you don't have to. We are here. We take it off your hands. So we're going to run through that process, how to make it as easy as possible, and that you guys can really know when to pass the ball to make it easy. Also, again, if you do not have my email address, you are welcome to email me anything that's any questions, any suggestions, and I will reply as soon as possible. We just want to, I almost want to say, I want to start the approach with rentals, and we have to start teaching people the right way. And that sometimes include even the landlords, to say that, if a tenant doesn't make payment, doesn't help how many times you scream or fight or anything, the agent can only do that much. So let's help people educate, let's help them prep, let's help them guide. And hopefully it's going to help a lot of people. Thank you everyone for their participation. I know I got quite a few people saying, so sorry, Elise, we no longer could attend. We are going to make the recording available. I'm wishing everybody, if there's no questions, I see a couple of thank yous. I'm glad to see everybody enjoyed it and had value. Please be safe and let us know if there's anything else that we can assist with. Keep well and enjoy. Oh, Karen, I can share that quickly again with you. I actually want to say, while I'm doing that, I just want to stop the recording Where do I do that quickly?